Hello, welcome back to Freddy in the Shed. I hope you're well. Firstly, apologies about the location. I've had to evacuate the main shack. Don't worry, it didn't catch fire, but we have a heat wave here currently in the UK and it's just ridiculously hot up there. So I've come down into the little shed shack hoping it's going to be just a little bit cooler. Purpose of this video is to have a look at this. This is a radio spectrum analyzer made by PORTXVNSA. This is the SA5 model sent in from Banggood. Current price in the UK is just about £75 thereabouts. Of course, I'll get you a little discount on that. That'll be in the description below. Not really my field on the channel, I'll be honest with you. I don't look at sort of technical scientific equipment, but this has some really good uses that hopefully I'll be able to show you in this video. In a nutshell, it's a clone of the tiny SA Ultra, which I think came out maybe a couple of years ago now. They've just put it in a bigger case, which I think is a good thing because I haven't got a tiny to test, but it's very much like my little network analyzer, my little Nano SA, and that has a rather, I think, fiddly little rocker switch there on the top for when you want to sweep across the display. This has a much nicer pot, which is stepped and is selectable as well, so I think it has nicer controls. I think they do pretty much the same thing like all of these clones. If you wanted the original one, I think the non-ultra one is about the same price, but I think the ultras are quite a bit more money. So anyway, that's what we're going to be doing in this video. I'll take you through it. Now, the main purpose that I've got this is to test these little dark side 2 meter 70 centimeter radios. I know a few of you have been asking about spurious harmonics. I know CB Mac, alright Mac, I know that he's been a subscriber to the channel for a long time and he was very curious about what kind of harmonics these put out. Well, we can connect this radio to the meter and we can display all of those harmonics. That will be coming up later, but it does other things as well. It's quite interesting. Let me show you on the bench. Now, the first problem we've got, it is a very reflective screen. It would have been better if there was a matte film over the screen. So as you can see, I've just connected the very small little telescopic antenna. Hopefully we can see this on camera. And there we go. So as I say, one of the uses of this is finding basically QRM or PLT noises, any interference you're getting in the shack, and to do that you can set a range of frequency, you know, the 11 meter band, 10 meter band, whatever you're using, and anything will show up on the scope. At the moment I haven't got any QRM coming into the shack, thank God, but let me just give you a demonstration. We can use something else. So to set a frequency range is pretty easy. Just click over here, so click start. So let's just go, for example, let's start at 700 kilohertz and then click here again, and let's stop, and let's stop at 1700 kilohertz. So this is the AM broadcast band. And there we go. So straight away, these are all of the AM broadcast stations currently on medium wave, and then to find out which frequency you want is you just use this tuning dial here, which I think is a massive improvement to the older ones that had the rocker switch on the top. This is so much easier to use. So we've got some really strong stations coming up here. So for example, one of these is going to be Talk Sport, I would have thought. There we go. So that's about top of that. It's 1089. Now, another couple of good features of this, it does take an SD card. I thought there might be one provided in the box, but I didn't see one. So you could then go into the menu system and then you could then save this scan in the memory on the SD card, and you wouldn't have to do that again. Also, which I think is quite interesting, and it's quite unusual really, it has a 3.5mm jack there. Hopefully you can see that. So we have audio out. It does need an amplified speaker system or amplified headphones. It's very weak. So you could, by tuning the wheel here, you could listen to these frequencies. So yeah, you can obviously do that on an SDR, can't you? But because this is such wide banded, because we can go from 100k up to 6 gigahertz, we can pick up absolutely everything. And there are certain frequencies, and I'm not even going to mention them on this channel, but there are certain frequencies that you should not be listening to, that it's illegal to listen to. Most of those are encrypted, but I'm sure there's one or two that isn't. But this will pick it up, and by using the headphone jack you can tune into it if you wanted to and listen to it, but obviously at your own risk. So yeah, quite an interesting device. I mean, as far as the menu system goes, obviously that you stop start, you can center, you can adjust the span. Also you can increase the refresh rate the more you zoom in. So if we want to zoom in on that station there, for example, let's just start 1000 and say 70 kilohertz, and then we'll stop it 1095 kilohertz. Let that refresh. The more you zoom in, obviously the more detail you'll get on the screen, but then the slower the refresh rate is. And there we go. So this is a much detailed look at this radio station. We're obviously on AM here, so we've got a carrier wave. If we was on sideband, for example, it would be quite interesting, because you'd be able to see the upper and lower sideband. But a couple of features that I think are quite useful that I've discovered. Obviously these are the active frequencies it's scanning across here, but we can pause that, so we can pause sweep, and then we can go back with the little encoder here if we want to find out exactly what that one is. For example, we know that's on 971 kilohertz. So yeah, very useful, especially for finding sort of QRM in your shack. If we unpause that, it does have a waterfall feature, we can turn that on. It is adjustable as well. It's a little slow to refresh. I mean, it's not an SDR obviously, but that comes up on the screen there, and if we click that again we can move it up, so we can actually trace the signals. Quite useful, I think, maybe on the airband. A lot of you like to listen to the airband, where you could do a sweep from 118 to 137 megahertz, and that will pick up which frequencies are in use, and it will give you an idea where to look. It is a bit slow, I will sort of say that, but it is there and it is quite useful. Another feature again I think is quite useful if you're going to use this on a bench, and you'll be that's quite small to read, isn't it, the frequencies? So we have something that's called big number there. There we go. I think this is quite useful actually. So now, although the top display, the spectrum scope is smaller, but we can now go along. And we can read off that is actually 909, that would be Talk Sport. But yeah, I mean, that makes things a little bit easier to read, doesn't it, again, if you're working with this on the bench. Now if you want to increase the scan rate or the sweep rate, you can increase that, but you do lose a little bit of detail. Again, that's in the menu here. So sweep points, I think it is, yeah. So at the moment we're on 450. You can take it down to 100. So obviously the sweep rate is increased, but you lose the clarity of the display. So not so sure that that's a good thing. Maybe 290. Yeah, 290 is not too bad. So yeah, there's lots of things. There's lots of things you can adjust in here. Yeah, you can go back. You can also, we can go for the sweep accuracy as well. So you've got precise, fast, noise, and you can speed up. I mean, I've set everything pretty much on auto, because I say a lot of this I don't really need to go into. Well, it's got even too hot in the shed now, so I've had to come indoors. It's crazy weather for early June in the UK. Anyway, so what we want to do now is we want to test these two radios for spurious harmonics, and that's really why I've got this meter in the first place. There is a couple of things we need to set up though before we can do the test, and the first thing is to do a self-test and calibration on the meter. And as I mentioned, I think at the beginning of the video, to calibrate the meter's really good, because it kind of self-calibrates. All you need to do is get one of these little pigtail connectors and connect the Cal and the RF port together. If I can get that to screw on, there we go. Okay, we've done that. Right, hopefully you can see with the reflections, very reflective this screen. So we tap this side of the screen here and you can see it says config. We go into that, and the first thing we want to do is a self-test. This will check all of the parameters of the spectrum analyzer, and we just let it get on with its own thing. You can see all of these different tests that it's doing. This one takes just under a minute, and in a minute it'll ask me to tap the screen, I think. Touch the screen, there you go. And that's it. So that's the self-test, so it's past that. We need to go back into this menu again, config, but this time we want to do a calibration. So where it says there level cal, we click that. Now we can set the range. We're just going to do the whole range for the calibration. We're going to go from 1K to 5 gig or 100 kilohertz to 5 gig, so we click that and then we click calibrate. Once again, you've got all of these series of tests coming up on the side of the screen. What I'll do is I'll shut up for a second and I'll speed this up a little bit because it does take a few minutes. So that's the calibration done. That's all we have to do, and we're ready to go. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, you can't just connect one of these radios straight into the RF port on the meter. It will damage it, puts out too much power. So we need to reduce the power down to a level that the meter can cope with. So what I did, I got one of these little variable attenuators in. I'll leave a link to this. They're not expensive. And what you got here is the bottom line. It's 0 dB, so there's no loss, there's no attenuation, and it goes 10, 20, and 30 dB. You can also, which is quite useful, if you've got a couple of little patch leads, you can daisy chain from one to the other. So you can join, we'll say, you know, the 30 and the 10 together to make 40 dB, or the 30 and the 20 to make 50 dB. Now it depends what radio you're going to use. I did a little tiny bit of research before I got this in, and from the radios that I'm using on low power, I need to reduce the power from, it said 40 to 50 dB. I could use this to get a 40. I could join the 30 and the 10 together, but I was looking around what I've got, and I've got Gary here, which you've probably seen in other videos. Gary is a 150 watt dummy load, but he's also got a BNC output which is minus 40 dB, and that's exactly, I think, what I need to go into the meter. So we're going to use Gary with a little SMA connector. Now when it comes to connecting to the radio, quite conveniently in the box is a little female to female barrel connector. Very useful for connecting devices. So we can put that straight into this pigtail, which goes into Gary's 259, and then we should be good to go. Just one more thing we need to set on the meter. So the very last thing we need to do is we just need to let the meter know what we want it to measure. So we go to here, hopefully you can see that. We go to measure, and then we click harmonics. So it's going to bring up a frequency keypad. So basically it wants to know the fundamental frequency we're going to be using. That will be the first peak on the spike. So we're going to do 446 dark side, so 446 megahertz. And then it wants to know the center frequency. Well, we'll put the same in, 446 megahertz. There we go. So the meter now knows that we're going to be testing at 446. So when we do connect the radio, the first spike, which will be the fundamental, will come up here on this side, and then we'll see the harmonics, the reflected spurious frequencies. Now if you look on the screen here, you can see it's gridded. Ignore the blue lines for a minute, but if you look at the grey lines, every one of those grids or boxes is 10 dB. Now I did check the FCC regulations or the standards for spurious emissions, and they say that from the fundamental signal to pass an FCC test, you should see a drop of 40 dB for the secondary, and then they'll be the ones going off. So on this screen then, so basically when we do this, we're looking at the first signal, and then we've got to count, if we can count 4 of these little square boxes, then the radio in theory would pass an FCC test. In practice it shouldn't really have hardly any spikes at all, but I think it will do. Let me set it up and let's test one of these radios. Right, that's everything set up. So we're on 446.00625, which is channel 1 of the PMR band. Let's key up the radio. Now because we've got such a wide sweep here, it's going to take the meter a few times for it to detect the signal and to start to build up the harmonic spikes. Here we go. They're coming through. So I think it takes about 4 or 5 from experience. So I'll speed this bit up. Okay, there you go. I've paused the screen. So let's zoom in and see what we've got. Now there are some harmonics obviously spreading right across the band here. It's numbered them. There's the primary one, or the fundamental number 1 there, and it's 2, 3. I don't know where 4, 5 and 6 are, but it's got 7 and 8. So there's our main transmission, and then our next one is down there. And I'll be honest with you, I mean, to me that doesn't look too bad for the XHDATA radio. I thought it'd be a lot worse. So as I mentioned, every one of these little squares, these little grids, is 10 dB. So if we can count 4 below before we get to the second harmonic there, in theory it would pass an FCC. So if we got the top one there, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's 4.5. So that's about 45 dB drop. I think it might tell you up here actually, 37. I'll make that a little bit more, not quite sure really. I think you can read it from there. I'm still learning how to use this meter. So although there are harmonics there, if you look at the number 2 and then the number 3, that would be our safety line there. And that one's a little close. That's up on 3.1 gig. That one's getting a little bit close. But to be fair, all of those are below 40 dB. Going to do exactly the same test as before. So let's key up the little TID radio and let it scan. Channel 1 of course, 446.00625. So same as the first test then, there's the fundamental, the first transmit. This one's very, very slightly out. I don't know if that's coming out, I think you can see it. So it's 445.9 megahertz, not as accurate as the XHDATA radio. So there's your first harmonic. So once again, that's just on the very top of that grid. So we need to count, if we can count 4 grids, we supposedly have passed. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So the 4th grid is there. So everything below that would pass an FCC test, and that is my assumption. If I'm wrong, by the way, just let me know in the comments, because I've not used this before, so I could be getting this wrong. But it looks to me as if all of these other harmonics, and there's a few more than you would like to see, and it's interesting to note there's actually more than the XHDATA radio, but all of those harmonics are below the 40 dB. Would be nice if they didn't exist at all, of course, but it does prove that the radio, in theory, according to my calculations, would be okay. Would be okay to use. So very interesting, quite an interesting device, isn't it? I mean, I think what I need to do, let me zoom out. I'm probably going to lose the focus. Oh no, looks like it's going to hold. So I think what I need to do, perhaps in another video, because obviously I've got a lot of these little 2 meter 70 centimeter radios that I've reprogrammed. So I think some of the Quangshangs and some of the very cheap Bofung's, perhaps I need to try them and we could compare it. These obviously are branded makes. That maybe is a reason why you should maybe buy branded makes. Okay, there's one more feature that this has got, which I think is quite useful for testing radios, so let me do that. So this time we want to go to mode, we want to change the mode. I've not done this before, so forgive me. So this is all of the different modes. So we want to go to signal generator. Frequency we want is going to be channel 1 on 446, so I think it's set. There we go, set. So we want 446.00625 megahertz. There we go, so that's our frequency set. We need to change the mode, of course, because these radios work on narrow FM. So mode, yeah, we want it in FM. So now when I switch this on, let me just zoom out, we should be able to see that these radios receive. Right, so everything's set up. So when I switch this on in a second, we should see these radios receive. The little light should come on the TID radio there. So I'll switch it on. There we go. Hopefully you can see that. We've got a receiving light on. I've also got a strong signal on the XHDATA. Now these radios should play that test signal. And this one as well. Interesting that it was pulsing on the TID radio for some reason. And not on the XHDATA. Strange. I'll turn it off. So quite useful if you want to test the frequency of your radio. If you think your radio's slightly out of tune, you can't really, I don't think you've got any offset on these to adjust, but certainly on a CB radio you could do the same thing. You could just set a frequency tone there, and then you could go inside and adjust the alignment hot. So yeah, it's something that's quite useful. Okay, let's put all this back. I think this is a nice piece of kit. Like I say, this is not my field lab equipment or testing equipment. It's not really a technical channel, this one, as you know, but I've managed to get to grips with this fairly quickly, and I think if I can do it, you certainly would. Things that I like about it, I do like the fact it's got this rotary encoder, which, as you can see on the trace there on the sweep, it's very quick and easy to move that along. I do find with my VNA nanometer that you've got that little rocker switch. I do find that sort of tends to make your thumb ache a little bit, so I do like that. And I think that's probably an improvement over the original tiny version, which this is obviously just a clone of that. That had the little rocker switch. Price wise, I think you can get the standard tiny spectrum analyzer. I do believe I think it's about the same price as this, around about £70. But if you want the ultra, if you want the higher frequencies, maybe you want to test out your Wi-Fi, things like that, I believe that the price is more. I think it's over £100, and I think you may need a code to activate it. This comes straight out of the box with it all activated. One feature that I didn't get around to testing on this is that on the bottom here, as well as your TF card slot and your headphone or audio out socket, you do have a USB-C, that's for charging the internal battery, but also that outputs video, so you can connect this up to an external monitor. I think it's VGA, but you can, so if you want to use this on the bench, you can then use it on a monitor. I believe the Tiny is exactly the same, because this is just a copy really, so that's a good feature. Only criticisms I've got against it is the reflective screen. It is super reflective, as you can see, and it's not so bad with your eyes. The camera makes it worse, but it would be much nicer if it had a matte sheen over the screen. But all in all, a nice bit of kit. Now just remember, if you do want to buy one of these and you want to test your radios, you will need a attenuation controller such as this, and you're going to need a dummy load as well to dump the power into. You don't have to buy a massive one there like Gary. You can get a sort of SMA one that screws on. I think they're about £25 or something, but just bear that in mind. You've got a little bit of extra cost. I'll leave a link to this in the description, because this wasn't expensive, so if you want to check this out. Now, as always, this came in from Banggood, so thanks to them for letting me have it. And as always, I get a discount code from Banggood, which will save you a few quid off. So if you are interested in looking into purchasing one of these, make sure you use my discount code whilst it's active. I don't think it will stay active forever. And yeah, it is active for UK purchases. I'm not sure about USA, it probably isn't. I know it doesn't work in Canada, so apologies about that. So that's the end of the video. Links to this is in the description. I hope it was informative. As I say, this is not my field, obviously, and I'm learning as I go along, but hopefully I've sort of shown you some uses of this meter. As always, cheers, thank you very much for tuning in, and please look after each other, stay safe, catch you on the next video. Cheers guys.
Fred's in the shed where the magic unfolds. Fred in the shed with his trusty CB. He's a friend to the lonely on a frequency.